Right. Well, Pope Francis is taking on those who deny the existence of climate change. He's also expressing papal displeasure with governments and corporations that aren't doing enough to protect the planet. Well, he says, and quote, "The earth, our home, is looking more and more like an immense pile of filth." Well, he calls for wealthy nations to move away from their massive consumption of non-renewable resources. In addition, they need to help poorer countries develop sustainable energy as well. He wants everyone to take responsibility, from recycling to taking public transit. Well, Steve Acunto is our good friend here from the Consular Corp College. Steve, the Pope just didn't say this in his speech. He says things that released in an encyclical. What does all of this mean?
Encyclical is, well, Pope, first of all, this Pope is Pope Francis. And he took that name to carry on the memory of St. Francis of Assisi, whose principal work, of course, was Laudato Si Signore, which is praise to God in the personage, in the form of all of his creatures. It is, by the way, the first poem in the Italian language written in the Vulgar. And this Pope, interestingly enough, wrote this encyclical letter in the Vulgate. He didn't write it in Latin. This is an entire message about naturalness, love of nature, respect for what God has created. An encyclical is a forceful document. Popes do not err in matters of faith and morals. Here he's going into the same sphere as Pope Leo XIII, who wrote the famous encyclical De Rerum Novarum on the dignity of work. Popes have been commenting for many years on social matters.
You know that old commercial, you're old enough to know it with me, E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. Well, this Pope talks,
that
people listen.
That was before my time,
Oh, come on, stop it. Listen to me. 1 billion Catholics.
Right.
So if he's getting behind this, this has a lot of teeth behind it in terms of the power that he has and what possibly can be done to convince nations to get on board with this whole thing of climate change.
It's a very powerful message. It resonates with people whose respect for surroundings has become secondary to their respect for their cell phones. Capitalism unbridled. You know, no pope has condemned capitalism. Popes have condemned the excesses of capitalism. They've condemned and argued against disrespect for labor, the laborers. In fact, one of the great encyclicals of Pope Saint John Paul II was regarding the dignity of the laborer. All economy begins with the laborer. And here, all understanding of the world begins with God's creation. It's a beautiful sentiment.
Let's talk about the politics of money here. Recycling, a big deal a couple of decades ago. People are really getting on board with it now. What we're hearing here, I just saw a report this morning in some of the middle Atlantic states here, around Maryland and other places here, that recycling now is becoming more of a burden monetarily to certain communities and local governments here. And people are kind of saying, well, hey, wait a minute, you know, this is costing us money now, as opposed to us it being like a moneymaker for us.
Yes, which of course the Pope argues against the consideration, the disproportionate consideration of monetary value in the care of what he calls our shared house, our common home. And in this case, of course, these facts are borne out that we're remediating a problem through recycling, through, it's sort of like a huge damage control feature, which is a consequence of unbridled, in many cases, unbridled capitalism. And I think that that's consistent in many of the encyclicals.
Okay, so what has the reaction been so far, do you know, his stance?
You know, since we're talking about a Roman encyclical, let's use Roman law, qui tacet consentire, which means who is silent is thought to agree. This has been met with silence, generally speaking. No one could possibly oppose this in his right mind. I mean, this is a different church from the one that's portrayed on some of the news vehicles.
Well, look, as we close here, I got to say this. You've got a big climate change meeting in Paris this winter. I'm assuming that you're saying here that the Pope will have a big impact on this meeting.
His words will, and I think the words of St. Francis, which are to celebrate our our brother the wind, our sister the moon, and as in the words of St. Francis, our mother earth. That's where that comes from.
Interesting.
I think they will resonate.
All right. Well, yeah, I think you said it here, and we've heard it first. Steve Acunto, as always, thank you.
Happy Father's Day to you.
The same to you. Brought your wife here today. That's good. Got good taste. Just ahead on Revised Review, the widening split between rival Palestinian groups and its possible impact on Mideast politics. Stay with us.